we come to a part of the forum which is actually extremely important. It's more or less to remember Sir Colin Spedding, and each year we invite someone to give a memorial lecture. And this year, representing our 30th anniversary, it's seemingly very appropriate that we have Tullis Matson, who's one of the sons of Richard Matson, who was one of the early instigators as vice chairman of the forum. So it seems all very appropriate, but it wasn't intended. It's just clever stuff that's happened. Tullis is going to talk about 30 years of equine breeding and a look to the future. So I think, Tullis, over to you.
Thank you very much. And Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, it's a really huge honour to be here today for the Sir Colin Spedding's Memorial, talking about 30 years of equine breeding. I'm going to transport you back in time and to our present time, and also hopefully into the future, that maybe what's round the corner in equine breeding. To start with, there's some references around the sort of 1300s, how AI was used in some Arabic text in some Arabian horses when they used to put a sponge in there, and they used to let the stallion cover the mare, get the semen out the sponge, and then AI some mares with that. And then looking at semen under the microscope first started in 1978. Mr. Al Spallanzai, he looked at the first cooling effects to slow down the process, the metabolism of semen, to make it last longer. And there's a French veterinarian, he started to suggest how AI could benefit and breed more mares for the stallion in the future. And if any of you out there think you've been dealt a bit of a hard job in life out there, just spare a thought for this guy here. I don't know what the risk assessment associated would be with that, but that's the first dummy mares going back to the 1930s. And now we have the sort of these real all singing, all dancing ones called the Equidane for modern day. But as you mentioned my father before, actually, this is my grandfather out here in 1936, tendering to the fields with some heavy horses back then. And really, sort of the 1960s, we saw a change from the agricultural horse really to the sport horse. And this was a notable time around about then when the use of the horse actually changed. The modern day scanner, the scanning, and Professor Twink Allen, he really was a pioneering in equine breeding, and very sadly we lost him last year. But this scanner reputedly went round in a transit van to start scanning mares. And now our scanner's about the size of a laptop. And from the 70s to the 90s, we saw a development of artificial hormones really to assist the cycle of the mares. But Professor Twink Allen was very much a pioneer really when it came to the horse reproduction side. On the thoroughbred breeding side in the 1960s, the pregnancy results, again, a lot of this work is from Professor Allen, it was around about the 75% rate. And a live foal rate was about 55. And the mares, they were covering about 40 to 50 mares. And I want to note this because we're going to come back to this maybe in a minute, this is why it's so important. Whereas nowadays, it's more like exceeds 90% end of season pregnancy rate, which is a 15% increase, and a live foal rate of about 85%. But look at that book size. It's not all doing 300, but some stallions are 300, 312 mares a season. And this really can have implications. And His Royal Highness the Aga Khan, actually in a dinner speech way back in 2001, sort of looked at saying the average mare possibly could have 12 foals, but one stallion could have 4,500 foals on the ground. And what's that going to do to the inbreeding side and the knock-on effects? And here actually see the inbreeding coefficient of the thoroughbred stallion going up. So in America, they tried to bring in a new rule to say actually any colt that was born in 2020 could only cover 140 mares. But actually, just recently, literally last week, this has just been rescinded, which could have huge, maybe issues in the future. So they were trying to control the amount of mares that a stallion could cover, but this has been turned around. And this just shows the inbreeding coefficient of some of our horses. And you see the thoroughbred horse here is at 12.5%, and that's just gone up by 1%. But it's the level of inbreeding plus the increase, which is really important that we have to be aware of at this time. And we don't know at what point does subfertility start kicking in. Is it 15%? Is it 20%? Or is it like the Clydesdale, which is up to 26%? When you think of brother-sister mating, it's 25%. That's how bad some of these species are. So there's something called the extinction vortex, and when you get these small population, this inbreeding, it's very hard to get out of it. And you start to get secondary effects, subfertility, higher reabsorption rates, neonatal death, and some of these breeds, it's as much as 30%, and I think actually it may even be higher than that. So some breeds are now, we're in great need for assistance to enable their future sustainability, and some of these new technologies may well help that. So this is a video that the Rare Breed Survival Trust did a few years ago, just showing the plight of the Suffolk punch. There were 1,300 breeding females in the 1940s. And when they did this project in 2017, there was fewer than 73. That's a dramatic loss. But actually, there is a bit of ray of hope. And whether this is through the rare breeds or the Suffolk horse, they have actually gone up a little bit now. I've just found out yesterday, it's about 82 breeding females about. But last year, they had 36 foals, 20 colts, and 10 fillies. And we have to look at that figure as well. There's a disproportionate there. And obviously, when you're dealing with rare breeds, you want more fillies on the ground. So the breeding side of using AI, in 1955, about 98% of mares were covered, done by natural covering. And nowadays, it's done a total role reversal. It's about 90% of sport horse, 37 years later, are done by AI. Embryo transfer. Again, Professor Twink Allen. I think this is one of the first foals, I believe. Sandra sent me this over the other day, done by embryo transfer in 1972. But this really opened up the gates. It wasn't just embryo transfer. This enabled us then to maybe look at embryo freezing, ICSI, which we're going to talk about in a minute, maybe cloning. But obviously, with the embryo transfer, there's lots of things that it enables you to do. Yes, even taking it to these extremes as well. And the other side of embryo transfer, obviously, it's for the sport horse, but also for rare breed preservation. This is the first foal born from a Suffolk punch using embryo transfer back in 2013. So this can really help with the rare breed side of things as well, that one mare can obviously start producing more foals from this process. The advances of frozen semen and it's a way of preserving semen indefinitely and allows it to capture and preserve those animal genetics. Has really moved on over the years. And this is the first foal actually back in 1955 born by frozen semen, way, way back. But the advances, I can't mention AI without mentioning this person, Martin Boyle. We always call him sort of the grandfather of AI, and he's very much pioneering in his day. And back in the 1980s, doing fresh and chilled semen, in the 1990s with frozen, and helped West Kington stud with Tim and Jane and Tessa really set up. And they were really pioneering the way to frozen semen. That really helped us then starting to spread our genetics all over the world. The frozen semen results, this is quite interesting. I love doing these sort of projects when you're doing these presentations, because you start to dive into things and suddenly start to realize there's these percentages that you never knew were already out there. But the new age of freezing extenders, it means that we can freeze more stallions, those tricky stallions that are hard to freeze, that we can do this now. But look at this, we think that frozen semen might not be the best way to get your mares in foal, but actually it works out better than chilled semen. And these problem maiden mares, yes, the percentage may be low, but actually in proportionate, actually putting your mare in foal with frozen semen is even slightly better than the chilled, believe it or not. And this is all the data collected at Twemlow's over, sort of 1,000 cycles. So it was not a small study either. Frozen semen enables us to export, and where that's moved in the years. Back in 2009, we exported, nearly 1,000 straws. And you can see back in 2019, it was 6,000 with a monetary value of over 4 million. The world's a very small place now, and we can actually export all over the world. And this is just hot off the press. Literally, this foal was born literally last week. It's a Suffolk in America. And this is a great way of spreading those genetics all around the world to try and reduce that, shrink that, make sure that got the biodiversity and that gene pool keeps not too much shrinking. Sexing semen, this is a fairly new tool. It's been used in the bovine world a lot, and what we look for is the X-bearing sperm. The female sperm has about 4% more DNA than the Y-bearing. And it means we can home in on that and actually separate those out into two different pots by some magnets and some very clever stuff. It's a lot more complicated than I'm making it out. But actually, the frozen, what we're really looking for is to start doing sexed frozen semen, and that's something we're just starting to do work on and trials on that, because that really opens the door up then, especially for the rare breeds. We're not seeing a huge take-up on the sport horse side, but for the rare breeds, we are seeing a big take-up on this. And this is one of our foals, I think, was born last year. And there was a huge amount of collaboration by all these different parties to make this happen. After 11 months of waiting, Ruby has produced a filly foal, and it's not just any old foal. This is a foal born by sex semen. We believe it's the first ever in the world for a rare breed animal to use sex semen, and using these technologies can really help this breed. There's only about 70 or 80 females left in the country. There's only 300 left in the world. They need all the tools of the industry, and just quite incredible now what we can do with science and technologies, and using this technology, maybe, just maybe, we can help stop these breeds from going extinct. But this holds the future. This little girl here. I must admit, 11 months is a long time to wait to see which is the right sex. I've never looked behind a horse's back legs so quickly before I made that speech, I must admit. So, but it was a great, we've still got a long way to go with that, and with all these technologies, they start off slow, but that was a great success story. Other work that's been done over the years is something called post-castration epididymal sperm extraction. This is where we can collect semen from the testes. This has been moved on. This is one of the first foals that we produced many years ago by this method, and it's usually done by trauma, but it's a great way of, as a last resort, of being able to store those animals' genetics. And we've done quite a few other species as well. But it all starts off, when we ever do these, it always puts my heart in my mouth, because the semen is totally motile at the time, because they're taken from the epididymis. But actually, so we can soon wake them up. We add this special extender on medium and actually brings life into the semen. But it actually works very well. And as I say, we've transferred some of this technology now onto other species as well. So we've done lots of different other species with this way. And we actually did a mouse deer the other day. The mouse deer is about one of the smallest deer in the world. They're about the size of a hare. But the horse's testicles weigh about 300 grams, and a mouse deer is about 1.3 of a gram, and we have to extract semen from that. Always amazed me. I can't remember who I spoke to an hour ago, but I know about 20 different species, size of testicles and weights and everything as well. So, it sets our challenges, but it really has opened the door, the equine industry, for doing these other species, and we've done so many more in the past. Oocyte recovery and ovum pickup. Now, this is something that's really galloped away fairly recently and got much more prominent. So this is where we're taking the eggs out of the follicles of the mares, usually done in the winter time, and sometimes they're aspirating between 10 and 15 eggs at a time. And they say there's been a rapid take-up of this in the last year or two, and is used alongside ICSI. ICSI, intercytic sperm injection, was first carried out in '96, and this is where we are inseminating one sperm cell, or actually putting one sperm cell into an egg to fertilize it. And it has lots of attributes. If there's no semen left or very little left, you only need one sperm cell. And this actual video here is one of the first ever videos of, it's a time-lapse camera taken every 20 minutes of a horse embryo. I know it could be obviously any embryo there, but I promise you it is a horse embryo dividing and at this very early stage of turning into a full-grown embryo at the time. But just on the stats of this is back in 2010, 44 ICSIs were done. And you see the rapid growth. And actually last year, at this one place at Cesare's in Italy, 6,000 were performed. And I think this may even go up to about 8,000 next year. It's really taken it by storm in Italy, in Europe. They're using this a lot, this process. Embryo freezing. This is something years ago. The conception rates are about 20% when you try to freeze embryos. But again, Sandra Wilshire did this study where they take out the blastocele fluid, take some fluid out of this embryo, collapsed it. It doesn't look very healthy. But you look at these pregnancy results, the difference between 45% all the way up to 75% with this work. So this is fairly new work that's coming on. So if we can freeze these embryos, it's great because we can use them again, not tomorrow, but in the future. This is quite a worrying time. We did this, we had Imogen Burrows, a PhD student from Harper Adams. She looked at some stallions at our place, over 1,000 stallions and 11,000 ejaculates, and saw a decline over 20 years of about 10%. But we're still trying to find out, is that the inbreeding issues? Is that the environmental issues? So that work is ongoing, but it's really important we look at the science of this because it's not a small study. It really just shows how that did change. Then moving on to the future on tissue banking and cloning. And obviously people may have different views on this, but I do believe actually biobanking and tissue banking is very much can hold the future for a lot of our breeds of horses and our endangered species as well. It's a great conservation tool, and we don't know what's around the corner. But this can really, really help. Once you've got those living cells, you can always use them for the future. So Arco, who was one of Nick Skelton's, brought him back after he broke his neck, went to the Athens Olympics, was the #1 show jumper in 2004, passed away a year or so ago, and they had a clone that was born in August this year, and it just shows what some of the things that can be done with the tissue sampling. And the other thing with the cloning, this is a Brzezowski horse, and they're extremely rare and again inbred. And effectively, this foal is 40 years old because it was taken from tissue sample. If it's going to play. No, sorry, the video. It's a great video. He's running around the paddock, and there's a bucket, and he was jumping this bucket. I thought he was going to be the next Olympic champion. But basically, this foal was born from tissue sample, frozen down 40 years ago, so they had the foresight to actually freeze that down. It was thawed out, and then this Brzezowski horse was born. Other things for the future. It's not for the future, it's happening now, is when we normally take tissue samples down, and at the end of the day, that skin cell is programmed to produce skin. But actually, if you turn these cells into pluripotent stem cells and reprogram these cells, and they're already doing this in mice, you could actually turn that cell into a sperm and an egg. And it's quite maybe scary or worrying, but actually it's amazing what applications that could have in the future. And this is the sort of work we're carrying on now. Sort of genomics and breeding, using DNA in animal breeding. We're already seeing this in the bovine world, how virtually a lot of the bovine world, how those bulls are selected is all by genomics. They're looking at the milk traits. And this may be, I'm not here to say what is right and wrong, but this may be the way that we start selecting our horses by looking at the DNA and the different traits with them. So that may well be in the future. And the fertility of a stallion is really the genetic potential plus sort of the influences of the environment. But there is meant to be about 37 genes identified with the importance of stallion fertility that we may be able to identify by a simple DNA test. So I think DNA profile and DNA testing is very much here to stay and very much here for the future. Now this one's a little bit more scary and a little bit more way out there. CRISPR technology and gene editing. This is where we can obviously alter genes. And CRISPR technology came in about 4 or 5 years ago, and you can alter a certain gene, which means that obviously you could make super horses at the end of the day. Now, I'm certainly not here saying this is a good thing, but I'm just saying what is possible. I know the thoroughbred industry are very, very concerned about this, and they're looking to try and find ways that they can identify whether this is actually being used to breed horses as well, because it's very hard to detect. But I'm afraid this technology is going to be, pardon the pun, but galloping away from us really, and it really is going to be, this is definitely the future sort of CRISPR technology in gene editing. We've only just scratched the surface on this so far, so I think we have to watch this space. So really, we stand on a pivotal time, and I'm standing here today for the 15 minutes. One extra species has gone extinct just in this 15 minutes that I've been speaking to you today. And what we have to do is we're using the equine technology to try and save some of these species that are going extinct. And it's been a great pleasure for me to be able to do this work and actually transfer this knowledge over to some of these wild animals that are out there. And it's been a great privilege to do that. And this is some work that we're doing out in South Africa. I only noticed the other day she was actually holding a baby, I think, down here. I ended up sort of holding onto an elephant's penis for about 2 hours a day, which sounds a bit weird, but it was the most incredible experience, weirdly. And we used all equine technology and semen extenders on these elephants. And it was, we had the sort of tourists turn up at the same time, but we did about 8 bull elephants over about a week. And there were about 10 million elephants at the beginning of the century. There's only about 300,000 left now. They're really declining. And again, a bit like our native horses, their gene pool is shrinking, and we have to preserve these genetics so we can bring them back. So that's the end, but thank you very much for listening, and let's look forward to the next 30 years.
Thank you very much, Tullis. Excellent. A really quick canter through what is happening. It's a really exciting time for genetic progress, and it's really a case of how society takes some of these things forward, because as many of you will be aware, there's ongoing consultations about gene editing. Gene editing is allowed in plants. There's much more concerns in farm animals. But you can see real benefits, certainly in farm animals, but improving health and welfare. There are pros and cons, and it's a really, really difficult area, this, and it's really down to society, that what society wants to happen. Super. Great. Thank you very much, Tullis. That's great. Thanks.